Welcome to the Retail is Detail podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hamer. This is where we go beyond the headlines and get into how great leaders, operators, and innovators in retail really think. From building teams, scaling businesses, to loyalty and data. Every week I talk to the people building and running and reinventing retail. Unpacking what's working, what's changing, and what's next. If you care about the detail of retail, you're in the right place.
There's a dirty little secret in the e-commerce world. Most agencies are much better at winning new projects than they are delivering them. Ryan Copeland got sick of watching that happen. So in 2020, he started Foundation Commerce to do the opposite. As one of only 2 Hyvä Platinum Partners in the UK, he since doubled Citizens Watch's revenue in 12 months and built a reputation for being the agency that tells merchants the truth. Ryan, welcome to the Retail is Detail podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. Nice to be here.
Yeah, great. And you left a perfectly good career in some of the best agencies in the world to start Foundation Commerce because you'd seen too many merchants get burned. What was the thing that finally made you think, right, I'm going to do this differently?
Yeah, I mean, it started off, I mean, I left my job. I was working for a leading Adobe solution partner, and I left the job there mainly because I'd got sort of sick of traveling into London. But the real spark for me with Foundation was my first client that I landed. I was very fixated on hours, right? So the first question I asked the client was, how many hours do you want? And then the next question was, well, what do you want me to spend those hours on? And his response to me was, Ryan, you're the expert. You tell me where those hours should be spent. And I think that triggered something in me, which was like, I should be the one telling the client, because I'm the expert, where the hours should be being spent in order to grow their business, rather than just billing them hours for the sake of hours. And I think that change in mindset quickly kind of created what was Foundation Commerce. You know, we see hours as just the currency that we transact in rather than the actual deliverable. And I think when you start talking to clients about growth and roadmaps and features and things like that, and you align with delivering those features in order to achieve growth, it creates a completely different outcome to just sort of saying to the client, well, how many hours do you want this month and where should we be spending those hours?
And as you know, the content of those hours and development is able to move faster, is hours still the currency, or have you found a cleverer way to speak to and build clients?
Yeah, I think we're definitely pivoting to more of a, I mean, there's loads of talk about value-based pricing, but I know that the bigger agencies are using that methodology. But for me, that just seems crazy that you charge a client more just because of their size. For us as a business, it's very much more, we're pivoting to more outcome-based pricing. So it's like we will deliver X for Y. Because as you know, with AI and things like that, if you're still billing hours in probably 2 years' time, you're probably not going to be around, because ultimately the number of hours that you bill will heavily reduce.
Yeah. Okay. So how's the education process been for clients of the fact that hours now have more value in them and therefore they shouldn't be the way that you think about these things?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. I think the whole industry as a whole has been billing hours since I've been working in it. I think it's more just educating them in that if we're billing you hours, the risk is all on you. If something takes us longer than we say it's going to, you're still going to get billed those hours. Whereas with the outcome-based pricing, it's very much focused on we will deliver X for Y. That way, if it takes us longer than what we've said, the risk is on us, not the client. And I think when you start to reposition it in that way to clients, you start to see the light bulbs, and you start to see them kind of get it and see that it is actually in their favor, that you do kind of build based on outcomes.
Okay. And before we get to more business, so you're based in Weybridge, you play golf at Fox Hills. Is running an e-commerce agency in Surrey as glamorous as it sounds?
It certainly has its challenges. I mean, thing is with me, I love what I do. I love nothing better than sitting down with a merchant and hearing where they are now and where they want to get to, and then helping them get there. Running an agency is very, very tough, especially in the current economic climate. I mean, I started Foundation a week before the first lockdowns hit. And obviously, I think that kind of primed me for what was to come. So I kind of figure if I can run an e-com agency in the middle of lockdowns, then doing it in today's climate should be a breeze, right? But obviously we rode the wave of the COVID econ wave that come as a result of that, and it obviously attributed a lot to the growth of the business in the early days. But yeah, I love what I do. I love running the agency. Is it easy? Absolutely not. It's certainly not for everyone. But yeah, I think enjoying what you do and loving it is what keeps you going.
And how has new business development changed as a result of agentic AI and are customers thinking they can do more things themselves? Are your prices getting interrogated harder, or are you spinning that to your advantage?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't come up as much as what I thought it would, to be honest. We are getting questioned, do we use AI? And we obviously answer that honestly. The answer is yes, we are using it to speed up the rate in which we can deliver things. But it's not, we don't get drilled on it that hard. And I think if you believe what you read on LinkedIn, we should be getting drilled a lot harder than what we are. So yeah, I do think that AI there's still a lot of hype around it. And I think it's all about just understanding what the limitations are with it and what its capabilities are and using them in the right way.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what do you think AI is really good at right now and where its limits stand as we're here in May 2026?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, AI it's an efficiency tool. It's there to increase the outputs of individuals. People that say that it's going to take over the role of the developer, I just can't see it, because if you put in terrible context, you get terrible output. So you still need to put in the right context to get the output that you're looking for. So I think the role of a developer will just evolve, and it will certainly be more around prompt engineering, but understanding the design patterns that go on behind the scenes in order to create the right prompt to get the right output. So that's how I envisage it. I certainly don't see developers disappearing from the face of the earth anytime soon, like some would have you believe.
Yeah, totally. And here at Lots of Wisp, we say it's all about the quality of the spec, like what you're actually trying to get AI to do for you in the actual coding. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. As I said, it's quality in, quality out. If you're feeding AI the incorrect context or not enough context, and you leave AI to sort of create assumptions and create its own context, it very rarely gets it right in those circumstances, in my experience. Where that will be in 5 years' time, who knows? But at this point in time, I can't see it taking any of my developers' jobs, certainly in sort of the very near future.
And talk me through, like, you've seen a lot of evolution in e-commerce, and you were at Gravy Chain, then Lux Echo, then Mind Candy, then Object Source. What did working in an agency teach you in each of those stops that was really valuable for setting up your own?
I think when I worked with Rebecca Jones at Object Source, she was very, very good at listening to clients and understanding what it was they actually needed and consulting with them on that. So I think one of the things I certainly learned from working with Rebecca was sometimes what the client says they want isn't actually what they need. And it's all about sort of coming to the table with fresh ideas and almost re-educating the client a little bit. The intended outcome and the goal doesn't change, but the tools, the features, the functionality that you use in order to get there, that's changeable and that's within your control. So it's all about doing the right thing by the client and giving them what they need rather than what they want.
Yeah, you've talked about a lot of agencies doing project flings rather than building real relationships.
Yeah.
What does a bad agency do to win business, and how much damage can that do to a merchant's business?
Yeah, I mean, we come across it all the time. I mean, I was speaking to a merchant the other day, and they've been quoted £300,000 for a Hoover themed storefront build, which is just, it blows my mind how anyone could justify those types of costs, to be honest. I think there are a lot of agencies out there that don't consult. They just say yes to everything in order to land the deal. The lack of discovery at the very beginning of the project is something we often see a lot. When we get a client approach us and they're in a bit of a state and they need us to kind of come in and salvage things, normally what we find is right at the very beginning of the project, there was a lack of discovery. The agency didn't sit down with them. They didn't understand the needs of the business. They didn't understand the needs of the customer. They didn't map out a detailed SOW that defines exactly what will be delivered at the end of the project. Everything gets left being very vague and open to assumption. And I say this to my developers all the time: most dangerous thing in web development is assumptions, and we should not be assuming anything. So, yeah, there's a lot of good agencies out there doing fantastic work, but there's also a lot of bad ones out there as well. And unfortunately, it's part of the reason why Magento itself has got such a bad name for itself over the last sort of 2 or 3 years, because most of the time it's not the Magento platform that's a problem, it's the implementer. But bad implementers are normally quick to blame the platform when it all goes wrong.
Right. Okay. If you're a merchant looking for an agency partner, what kind of questions would you ask to find out whether it's a good partner with your self-interest, with your interests in mind, or a self-interested partner?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think you need to be asking them, like, what's their discovery process like? And do they charge for it? I mean, if they're doing discovery for free, then the chances are it's not going to be anywhere near as thorough or comprehensive as what it needs to be in order to deliver a successful outcome. So yeah, understanding what the discovery process looks like, because in my view, that is the most important part of any project. You get that bit wrong and you're setting yourself up for failure straight away. Looking at accreditations, things like Hyvä Platinum Partner status, Gold Partner status, case studies, recent builds that they've deployed within the last 1 to 2 months, client references, speaking to their clients directly and hearing it from the horse's mouth. And these clients have to be active clients, not ones that they used to work with many, many years ago. I think when you start to sort of delve into all those different areas, you start to build up a picture of kind of what the agency's about and how they operate. And then you just, unfortunately, it's then down to gut feel, right? You're never going to kind of guarantee success with any agency, but you can certainly take a good steer on it based on asking those types of questions, I think.
Awesome. And we'll dig into platforms in a bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about you personally. So you describe yourself as never been a fan of taking your own photo, not natural self-promoter. So how does a technical founder who doesn't love the limelight build a business profile?
I mean, I think one of the things I learned pretty early on with Foundation was that I had a rare skill set in that I was a very, very good Magento developer, very, very technical, but I could also sell and I could also relate complex technical solutions and translate them into really simple terms that merchants could understand. That quickly obviously led to Foundation quite quickly growing and getting a name for itself. And I think for me, I'm not on any form of social media. I'm not on Facebook, Instagram, none of that. I'm only on LinkedIn purely for business purposes. So, I'm very much against posting things on social media. My wife will tell you when we're on holiday, I'm very, very strict with what she can and can't post on her profile. So yeah, I think it's about finding that balance. It's kind of giving enough away that people can kind of see that persona on LinkedIn and understand a bit about you as a person, your likes, your dislikes, and letting them in a little bit, but not so much that you're kind of showing your entire life off to the world. Because for me, I like my privacy.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. No Instagram, but LinkedIn does have its purposes, and you've been very open on LinkedIn. You talked about your dad passing and what that taught you about the business. I mean, what did that period change about business for you?
Yeah, that was probably one of the most challenging moments in my life. My dad was 56 when he passed. He passed away because of cancer, 3 months from diagnosis to him passing. So it come out of absolute nowhere. And my dad had always instilled a really, really hard working ethic in me, in that if you want something in life, you need to work hard to get it. I was always ringing my dad, asking him for advice on the business. What do you think we should do here? What do you think we should do there? I'll never forget when I landed my first Magento contract. I went from like a 50K salary to a contract paying about £350 a year. I was absolutely buzzing. I was ecstatic. Rung my dad up and I was like, "Dad, I've got this contract. It's paying me all this money. It's great." And he went, "That's great, son. So when you're going to get another 3 or 4 developers working underneath you and then earning on it was just like, he was always pushing me to do more. And I think losing the ability to give him a call and just run a few things past him, adjusting to that was quite difficult, as well as dealing with all the emotional side of obviously losing someone so dear and so close.
Yeah, sure. Do you feel like Foundation Commerce is now delivering on that original promise?
I think so. I mean, we're a team of 15 now, and so we've got quite a nice sized dev team as well. So, and we're branching out into other services now. We've got Foundation CRM up on its feet, so we're now doing specialist CRM services, not just for ecom, but for universities, travel businesses. That kind of centralized goal of helping our clients to succeed, empowering growth for those who think bigger. We're now looking to apply that same that same system into other areas. And the CRM stuff is working incredibly well so far.
You work with your other half. A lot of people dream about that. Some people have some reservations about that. How was
Yeah.
your reality compared to what you expected?
Yeah, I mean, listen, working with your other half is incredibly difficult. I mean, the story of how she come to work at Foundation was quite funny. It was basically during COVID, the lockdowns hit. She had accepted a job offer with a new business and handed in a notice at her current one. The lockdowns obviously hit. They withdrew the job offer from her new offer, from her new job. She then went back to her current job and was like, look, I'm withdrawing my notice. And they was like, nah, sorry, we're making redundancies. You've got to go. So she was kind of forced to work with me a little bit because I was like, well, look, I need a project manager. Just do it as a small gap filler. And she did. And she's never left ever since. But in terms of working together, yeah, I mean, my mates question me all the time, like, how on earth do you work with your missus and live with her? We get on really, really well. And I think communication is key. I mean, we had a rule where we would only talk business in a specific room in the house. So if we were sitting downstairs having dinner and someone brought up a business topic, we'd be like, right, let's go up to the office, shut the door, sit down, have the conversation, and then leave that room. So I think we were very disciplined with it as well. So obviously when I started Foundation, it was from a home office. So yeah, we love working together. You know, we share the highs, the wins, but then also when you're down in the trenches, really trying to kind of make things work, you're kind of there for each other and, you know, helping one another kind of get through it. So yeah, it can be lonely at the top. And I think when you've got your partner alongside you, it makes the whole experience a bit more enjoyable.
That's awesome. So let's talk. Foundation Commerce is one of only 2 Hyvä Platinum Partners in the UK.
Yeah.
But for those who don't know what Hyvä is, and we mentioned at the beginning of the show, what's the plain English version of why it matters?
Yeah, I mean, Magento as a platform was, you know, Magento 2 when it was launched had a lot of problems. I think Adobe really steadied the ship when they come in, but there was still the kind of underlying architectural problems with the storefront because it was slow, difficult to work with, expensive to run. And I think, you know, Hoover's solved all the problems that there are with Magento. That they started off with just the storefront, giving you lightning fast page speeds out of the box. They then moved on to deploying the same tech within the checkout. So the checkout would load as fast as the storefront. Everyone's been moaning about Magento Page Builder for many, many years.
Yeah.
They created a CMS. And the CMS that they have created is absolutely out of this world. It's comparable to things like Storyblock and Prismic, which would cost you tens of thousands a year to run. So yeah, I think Hoover has saved Magento, in my view. I think for me personally, all of the pain points that merchants had with the platform have now evaporated. They're gone because of what Hoover have implemented. And I think if you look at the roadmap that they produced and the features and functionality that they're bringing into the table, you know, category merchandising, email design, menu builders, you name it, they listen to the feedback that comes from agencies like Foundation and real life merchants that are using it, and they take that feedback and they actually build solutions to the pain points that merchants have got. And I mean, the adoption rate of Hoover Commerce is pretty impressive, to be honest. You know, I instantly saw the potential in it as soon as it was demoed way back when. I think it was 2021 at ReactorCon. And for us, for merchants not interested in Hoover, then, you know, we don't want to work with them because we don't feel that we could grow their business if they was just using standard Magento.
Okay. So was there a risk that, you know, if Hoover doesn't exist, are we talking about you maybe not being a Magento specific agency at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of stayed specific to the platform because there's very few good Magento agencies out there, being honest. And I think as more and more agencies have left to go and focus on platforms like Shopify, the kind of number of agencies in the pool has kind of shrunk, which has obviously left us loads of opportunities. I mean, when I hear people say that Magento's dead and all this, you know, I've grown a business from 1 to 15 headcount in 4 years, just purely doing Magento. So there's tons of opportunity out there when you do a good job and you know what you're doing with it. Because as a platform, because it's open source, you know, the platform is only as good as the implementer. And if you get a bad implementer, you will have a bad platform. It's as simple as that.
And when you say it's open source, are you talking about Magento, Adobe Commerce, or are you talking about Hoover specifically?
So yeah, Magento, Adobe, Hoover, it's all open source.
Okay, cool.
So with Hoover, even with Hoover Commerce, we can extend, we can develop, we can build anything with it. There's no limitations with it whatsoever.
Very Very cool. And why is it that a separate organization, that Hyvä, is building all of this innovative, Magento, rather than Adobe, who owns Magento itself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you'd have to ask someone at Adobe that, to be honest. I
Good
think,
sign.
yeah, definitely. I mean, listen, I think Adobe have their strategy. I think it's very much focused on enterprise level merchants. And I think what they've done by taking Adobe Commerce upstream into that enterprise tier, they've left a massive gap in the SMB and mid-market, which Hyvä has filled quite nicely. I think they saw the opportunity there relatively early on, and they've capitalized on it massively. I kind of feel like with Hyvä and I think Adobe have done a fantastic job of stabilizing Magento. If you look at Magento now, the platform is completely stable and production ready. It took a while to get there, and I think that's because when Magento 2 was first released, it was some sort of venture capitalist group that had it. It was released far too early. It was released in probably an alpha state. It wasn't even a beta state. And then when it was released, they didn't really stabilize the platform for 2 to 3 years after that, because they was clearly building it to sell it. And they did. They sold Magento to Adobe for a lot of money. But it wasn't until Adobe really got their hands on it that Magento 2 actually stabilized and become a platform that's production ready, in my view, because there were a lot of issues with it prior to Adobe taking over.
Okay. So the Adobe takeover has been a positive thing overall.
Listen, I think there's a lot of people that will tell you otherwise, and they'll say that Adobe they're gonna kill Magento and all this sort of stuff. But I've not seen anything from them that would indicate that they are going to. They've always, come out and said that they're fully committed to maintaining support for the open source product, and ultimately they're taking the Adobe Commerce product, up market to merchants that are in that enterprise space. They've been very clear on what their plans are for the platform. So yeah, I think the Adobe acquisition has been incredibly positive for Magento because it's stabilized the platform. I almost feel like we're back at the Magento 1 days where you could build the platform really, really easily and deliver on merchants' requirements without having to charge them a mortgage in order to do it. So I do think Adobe have certainly, as I say, stabilized the Magento platform. And with Hyvä coming on and layering themselves on top of Magento, it really is a world-class platform that can really help businesses scale quickly online.
Nice. And you're obviously a fan of the open source model. You built the Klaviyo compatibility module for Hyvä and released it for free to the entire community.
Yeah.
What made you do that? And what have you tried to do for your business?
Yeah, I mean, at the time we had a very good partnership with Klaviyo, and we saw an opportunity to help merchants, and we built the connector ourselves, and we just thought, you know what, this is definitely going to be needed by a large portion of the community. Let's give a little back and put it out there, and we did, and I think it's used by pretty much every merchant on Hyvä Commerce or Hyvä theme that uses Klaviyo now. That just kind of proves the beauty of open source, right? Yeah. It's like you've got this big, massive community of developers supporting the platform and building new features and functionality that you as a business can take advantage of for free. Any merchant on Klaviyo, if that module wasn't there, they'd have to kind of pay an agency to build it themselves. So I think, it kind of encompasses the benefit of open source and the beauty of it.
Yeah. How much of that is sort of idealism, like being a good developer, and how much of that is good business sense?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a balance, right? I think it's a balance. If everything was open source and we didn't charge for our services, then we wouldn't have a business, right? So I think it's all about finding a balance of kind of that custom feature development work that should be charged to the client, but then also giving back to the community and giving back to Magento and Hyvä and helping others. And I think for me, if I look at kind of what drives me as a person in business and in life, it's to help other people, whether that's helping a merchant get from 10 million a year to 20 million a year, whether that's helping Klaviyo users use Klaviyo with Hyvä. I think the open source community has that kind of willingness to help instilled in everyone that's part of it. And I think when you're part of that community and you talk to people at these events and stuff, it's a really beautiful thing.
So we at Loxa, as you know, have a Magento app. Should we be looking to open source the compatibility with that?
Well, I think ultimately, if you did, you'd probably be having your module supported for free, ultimately, because there are developers out there that see coding as a hobby. And as long as you've got someone vetting the PRs that are coming in, then definitely. I think Adobe really have missed the trick with the open source community, because there are so many open PRs at the minute where people have pushed code and said, this will fix this problem, but they're just kind of sat there collecting dust and have been for many, many years. So Adobe, I really wish they would embrace the open source community a lot more and kind of really bring them into maintaining and developing the Magento product. Because if they did, I think it would make the Magento product a lot stronger.
Awesome. That's very helpful. And then let's talk about your successes. So Citizen Watch doubled their revenue, 43% conversion uplift in 12 months. What were you doing in that build that the previous agency wasn't?
Yeah, I mean, Citizen Watch was the kind of brand that really made us famous as an agency. I think when we pitched to them, we was up against two of the biggest Magento agencies in the country at the time. I think it was at a time where Hoover was relatively new. PWA Studio was being pitched as the kind of the future of e-commerce, the bridge between apps and websites. And I think it's been discovered now that that's probably not the future of e-commerce, but at the time it was the golden bullet. And we went in and pitched Hoover, and luckily enough for us, Citizen took a chance. I think part of the success was the fact that they really did listen to the advice that we gave them and really kind of let us do our thing, essentially. But also the current website was in a pretty bad place. You know, it had been clearly built desktop first. The mobile experience was terrible. I mean, how customers were placing orders on mobile when we first got hold of it, I don't know, because it was basically unusable. And I think 70% of the traffic that was being driven to the site was on a mobile device. So I think we quickly delved into the data and kind of spotted the opportunities there. And I think, when you've got a brand like Citizen, where it is such a reputable brand, and you can make changes to the website in terms of performance, in terms of mobile UX, the impact that those changes can have is incredible. I think it was never anticipating to double their revenue in year one. It just kind of proves that, Hoover does work. And I think with Citizen, they were the first real brand to really embrace Hoover and give it a chance and go with it. And I think once the Citizen Watch site was live and we published the case study, it really did make a lot of other brands and agencies turn their head and think, wow, what is this Hoover thing? Because it looks like it's doing a pretty fantastic job where PWA Studio and other alternatives are not.
Interesting. And when you do a technical audit on a Magento site, as you've done many, what's the most common thing that nobody's fixed?
So at the minute, it's still page speed performance, believe it or not. There's a lot of sites out there that are failing core web vitals, and it's just so detrimental to the business. I mean, it's proven now in multiple studies that the faster the website, the higher the conversion rate. That's been proven time and time again. Yet there's still brands failing core web vitals. So core web vitals is this set of performance metrics that Google have provided brands so they can gauge how quick their websites are. Google uses core web vitals as a prominent ranking factor as well now for organic search. So it's just like a snowball effect. You get the website performing really, really quick. They pass core web vitals, they get more organic traffic, which means more traffic coming to the site. And because the site's faster, the conversion rate goes up. That's a perfect storm for growing an online business. And it blows my mind how many merchants I speak to where you're like, are you aware of what core web vitals are? They're like, no. Does your agency, educate you on page speed performance? No, we've heard of them, but we don't really know a lot. And it's just like, this is kind of like bread and butter to growing an e-com business, right? So again, it's that focus on hours. Agencies that are focused on billing hours, there's a complete disconnect there between what the agency is trying to do and what the merchant is trying to achieve. All merchants are trying to grow online, right? That's exactly what most of them are trying to do, 95% of them. And I think, when an agency's primary focus is billing hours, regardless of where those hours are spent, there's a complete disconnect there between what the merchant's trying to achieve and what the agency is trying to achieve. And I think it can cost the merchant a lot of money long term.
Yeah. Can you put a number on that for me? Like what is a second of page load time cost a merchant in lost revenue?
Yeah. The reports are one for every second that your website is over the industry benchmarks, the benchmarks being 2 seconds on desktop, 4 seconds on mobile. For every second you're over that, it costs you 7% in conversion rate.
Wow.
So if you've got, we audited a checkout page the other day, it took 7 seconds to load. So you're losing out on like 21% on your conversion rate thereabouts just by that, that one issue. And then
what
so you apply that to a brand that's doing, say, 50 million turnover, you can quite easily grow the business just by fixing things like that.
Yeah, awesome. And what are the other key metrics you look at in that order that are easy tweaks to win with?
Yeah, I mean, we normally find with some merchants that a lot of agencies out there have this kind of extension first mentality. It's like, oh, we need product stickers. There's an extension. Oh, we need a country switcher. There's an extension. And I think what happens is over time, these extensions all build up in the code base.
Yeah.
And it gets to a point where even though they're disabled, they're still plugging in JavaScript and CSS files and making the back end of the system slower. So one of the major things that we do with all of our projects is we go through a massive third-party extension audit where we kind of look at all the extensions that they're using, map out what they're being used for, and then sit down with the client and say, look, is this needed? No, bin it. Is this needed? No, bin it. Is this needed? Yes. Okay, but we don't need the whole extension. Let's refactor that and use custom development. And I think one of the most extreme examples I've ever seen is one merchant that we audited had 200 extensions installed. And when we audited it, they are actually only using about 42.
Yeah.
So we was able to remove pretty much like 2/3 of the extensions that they were using. And as a direct effect of that, with the Hoover theme storefront, we was able to relatively easily pass core web vitals.
Okay, very cool. And then what's the hardest thing you've ever had to tell a client, like about their website or something they really did not want to hear and you knew the truth was going to hurt?
Yeah, I mean, so we I won't say who the client is, but this was for sort of in year 2 of Foundation Commerce, and we inherited a build from one of the gold Adobe solution partners, and the build was an absolute mess. It was an absolute train wreck, and the brand had spent like 6 figures on launching on Adobe Commerce. And the conversation I had to have with them was like, look, it's going to be cheaper long term for you to start again and rebuild this than it is for us to just carry on trying to repair what's there already. Longer term, if we carry on with what you've got now, it's going to cost you more. I appreciate that's going to mean more investment into the platform, but because it's been done so wrong in the first instance, this is what I would advise. Unfortunately, they didn't take my advice, and I sort of said, well, look, I don't really feel like, I can work with this application. So we parted ways. 6 months later, I think they migrated to WooCommerce, which was their platform that they was originally with. But yeah, that was a very, very tough conversation to have because they'd spent a hell of a lot of money and the agency just didn't deliver.
Right. And then conversely, what's the most expensive mistake you've made for Foundation Commerce? And would you do it again?
Most expensive mistake I've made? That's a good question. I think one of the most expensive mistakes that I've made is rush hiring.
Yeah.
I think I hired a project manager and their salary was fairly high. They wasn't the right fit. It soon became apparent that they weren't doing the job in the right way. Projects were going over budget and things like that. And we were swallowing the cost. We wasn't passing those costs on to the merchant because ultimately it was where the projects were being poorly managed. So we parted ways, and that, because it was after the probation, that cost me a lot of money. We had to put him on gardening leave for 3 months. So I think for me, the lesson that taught me was don't rush hire. Take your time, do your due diligence, and make sure that the person that you're bringing in is the right fit for the role. Because if they're not only can it have a financial impact on the business, but it can also have an impact on the rest of the team as well, and also client happiness. So the ramifications of getting that wrong, they're massive. And luckily enough for us, it was very early on in our journey as an agency. So we learned that lesson pretty quickly, which has empowered me to build the superstar team of A players that I've got now.
Yep. And when you talk about a superstar player, a Foundation Commerce person, how do you define that?
It's someone that obsesses over growing our clients' businesses. Sam Varnum, my head of client services, this is exactly what he does. He just obsesses over it. And for me, that's a mentality that I want to put into everyone that joins Foundation. the internal slogan is we only succeed if our clients succeed. And ultimately, in order to do that, we have to obsess over growing their business, over looking in the data, looking for opportunities to grow, suggesting solutions to put in place the features that will help those opportunities come to light. And yeah, I think for me, it's obsessing over your client success and putting your clients at the center of everything that you do as a business.
And like in terms of partnerships, like I've kind of admired. So we have a newly formed partnership. You've always said that like you will bring it up with clients as and when it comes up organically, when it's a solution that is for a problem that they're solving. Like, how do you think about partnerships, and how do you think about vetting partners sufficiently so that you can be sure about what you're offering to your clients?
Definitely, it's a good question, and I think there's a lot of agencies out there that will partner with a brand. They'll see the commission model and they're like, right, let's go and sell it into everyone now, before they've even looked at kind of whether it's the right fit, whether it actually integrates well and all that sort of thing. I think for me, I want to position us as more of a strategic partner for our clients. So if I'm running to them every week and saying, you need to buy this platform just because I've started a new partnership, for me, that doesn't work. There's a disconnect there. So with all the partnerships that we come on board, we don't agree to sell any minimum licenses or hand over a certain number of leads. And I think that's what attracted me so much with Loxar very early on, was that there was no real pressure to sell. It was very much like, here's the product. This is what it does. This is the benefits to the merchants. Come back and see us when you've got a merchant that's potentially interested. And obviously that aligned quite nicely with our consultative sell approach. And for us, it's very much about sitting down with the merchant and coming back to that point I made earlier, where it's like listening to what the client wants, but then actually giving them what they need. And sometimes when a client comes to you, if we was just to do everything that our clients wanted, we probably wouldn't have them all on our books now. Because as I said, the aim and the objective is always the same, but the journey that you take to get there can always be different. And I think sometimes you need to take your own directions rather than those of the client.
Yeah, it's a Henry Ford quote. If I gave them what they asked for, they'd have faster horses. So you've coined the phrase the magpie effect for people who chase every shiny new thing. What's the e-commerce trend right now you think too many people are chasing that they really shouldn't be?
Headless commerce. Honestly, I've never got it. I've never got it. And I don't think I ever will. I see the reasoning behind why you would want to do it. It really only applies to like the top 1%. But it's being pitched as this silver bullet to commerce, and I just think it needs to be simplified, especially for SMB and mid-market brands. So I think when PWA and Headless was announced, there was a lot of agencies that jumped all over it because it was like, yeah, look, 6-figure project, let's go and sell. But I think what we did was we took the time to really understand what Headless was, what PWA was, how it would benefit the merchants. And I think we quickly identified that it wasn't the right fit for the type of clients that we was working with. Hence why we went out and looked for alternatives. And that's where we discovered Hyvä.
Okay. So if you had to put a sort of approximate gross merchant value or revenue label on when a brand should think about Headless, where would you pitch that?
100 million plus.
Yeah.
Because even at that level, I still don't think it's needed. I think it's a very, very particular use case, and you have to have a tech stack that warrants headless commerce. Because the cost of it and the cost of ownership, I just don't get it. Listen, I'm sure there's people out there that will kind of get it and sell it and do well with it, but for us as an agency, it just never made sense.
Yeah, fair enough. How are you thinking about AEO or GEO or LLMO? And like, obviously, SEO has been a focus for you, but this is the new year and the algorithm's different. Like, how are you thinking about that? How are you helping your clients?
Yeah, we're starting to have those discussions with clients around kind of LLM discovery. Ultimately, my prediction is that I think LLMs like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, they'll become the new search engine. So we're actively researching tools, methods, approaches that we can take in order to give those LLMs, when they're indexing product pages, all of the information they need in order to surface our clients' products in recommendations. I recently came across a tool called Jeffy, And it kind of automates that process for you. So it will kind of monitor citation data within the LLMs and then use that data to then dynamically put product content on the product pages to get those products surfacing inside LLMs. Very, very new product, but it's very, very exciting at the same time. So yeah, if merchants are looking to venture into the whole GEO thing, definitely check out Jeffy, because we've been incredibly impressed with what we've seen from it so far.
And we have somehow got almost 45 minutes into this interview without ever mentioning Shopify, which is remarkable.
Yeah, I know.
It's going so well.
Yeah, I'm like public enemy number one in the Shopify community, I think, because of that LinkedIn post that went out many years ago. Yeah, so I put a post out on LinkedIn that basically said that cost of ownership becomes cheaper when you're using Magento once you go over the 5 million mark. And I think the president of Shopify himself decided to comment on the post and call my character into account. And it was hell. It was absolute hell for 2 weeks. And the post blew up pretty big. I think at the time, looking back, it was at a time where I knew Hoover and I delivered multiple Hoover projects and I saw the impact that it had. Whereas the rest of the kind of LinkedIn community and the rest of the world didn't really know what Hoover was at that point. So when they probably saw the post, they was probably thinking, my God, this geese is completely nuts. How is that even possible? I think now people are seeing why it's possible, because with the payment fees that Shopify charge now, when you start going over the 5 million mark, that cost of ownership swings heavily in Magento's favor, purely on the payment fees alone.
Was there, like, what kind of percentage fee would you expect to pay with Shopify as a 5 million merchant, and what can you get it down to by choosing your own solution with Magento?
I know for merchants, for merchants with a very high GMV, you could be paying anywhere around the 1% mark for payment fees. But obviously with Shopify, I think it's a lot higher than that. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. With Shopify, you are going to be paying at least, I would say, 0.4, 0.5% on top of what you could get with an external payment provider. When you look at what that is as an amount, when you're doing 5, 10, 20, 50 million a year, it's a big lump sum that should be considered for sure. Because, ultimately, what are you actually paying for there?
Yeah, okay. And so you stand by that post today? Put it up. You'd put the same post up today. 5 million
I mean, we've proven it. We've proven it with merchants that are doing 5 million turnover. The cost of ownership associated with Magento it's so lower than what it was like 3 or 4 years ago. I strongly believe that if a Shopify merchant was to come to me and say, Ryan, we're doing 5 million a year on Shopify, we're not happy with the platform, can you do a cost of ownership analysis and prove to me that Magento with Hoover is cheaper? We'd be able to do it, no problem.
Okay, cool. We've heard of like quite a few transitions to Shopify from Magento, BigCommerce, whatever. But not. I did hear about my first Shopify Magento transition. Do you think we'll see recently from a significant merchant? Do you think we'll see more of that? And how can you and other agencies make a better case for Magento in the market?
Yeah, I think. I mean, one of the predictions I have is that we will see a swing back towards open source commerce. I exhibited at Ecom Expo last year, and there was a lot of merchants that I spoke to on that day that were using platforms like BigCommerce, Shopify, that were really unhappy with the platform. They felt limited by it, and they felt that the fees that they were paying were incredibly high based on what they were getting back from the platform. So I do think there's a lot of merchants that are on those platforms that are unhappy. But I think it's no good saying Magento is better than Shopify and BigCommerce is better than Magento. I think ultimately it comes down to the merchant's requirements and their own kind of situation. For some merchants, Shopify is a fantastic platform. It takes away all of the complexities that come with running an open source platform like Magento. But I think for a lot of merchants where they kind of do have kind of technical skill set in-house, open source is definitely a better option when you look at the fees and the cost of ownership that comes with that. I think we're actively speaking to a merchant at the minute. So they had 4 Shopify stores. We migrated one to Magento Hoover Commerce. Because of the success that store has had, we're now talking to them about migrating the other 3 over. So it is happening behind the scenes. I think the problem that Magento has is that it doesn't have a marketing budget that Shopify does. And Shopify's marketing is world class. I envy it so much. It's absolutely world class. If someone thinks e-commerce, they think Shopify. That's where they've got to, really. I don't think Magento will ever have that marketing budget. I think Adobe have come out and said we're not going to market Magento as a platform. Hoover, I think, eventually may have a marketing budget, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near what Shopify's is. So I think it just comes down to sort of case studies and building awareness of what Hoover is, how it compares to SaaS, and then giving the merchant all the information they need and letting them hear from both the open source side and the SaaS side of the fence, so that they can make an informed decision as to what approach is best for them. Because I do feel like at the minute there's a lot of merchants out there that only hear the SaaS side of the story and they don't hear the open source side.
Mm, yeah, totally. And then there are other sort of use cases, like, for example, why we're looking into the builders merchants market, and we notice they're all on Magento. Like,
Yeah.
why are they all on Magento? Is there something specific about being a builders merchant?
Yeah, I think it just all comes down to the requirements and the type of products that you sell. Shopify comes with out of the box features. And if those features don't match your requirements, you're very limited in what you can customize. Yes, you've got the app store and you can plug in apps and things to give you that additional functionality. I think the reason why builders, merchants, and people like that use open source platforms like Magento is because they can customize it how they want. If you're selling bits of timber and they're all different lengths, shapes, and sizes, and you need to have those sizes inputted on the product page, then that might be an option to use Magento. Also, integrating with third-party systems is a lot better and a lot easier with Magento than it is Shopify. Shopify give you a set number of APIs that you can use. Obviously, Magento is open source, so if the API doesn't exist, you just build it. So I think there's a couple of use cases there as to why builders merchants prefer Magento. I think the builders merchants industry as a whole is also very behind when it comes to e-commerce. I feel there's certainly a whole modernization piece that needs to go on within that industry, and I know that as a business we're trying to lead that.
So those Magento 2 sites need to become Hoover.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. If you're not, I mean, honestly, like, we sort of say, when I sit down with a merchant and they say to me, Ryan, why Hoover? The first thing I say to them is, well, let's look at how much it's going to cost you not to move to Hoover. Your conversion rates are X, your page load speeds are at Y and Z. If we get your site passing core web files, your conversion rate's going to increase by X amount. Therefore, that means more revenue. And 9 times out of 10, when we do a Hoover migration, the build pays for itself within the first 1 to 2 years, purely because of the revenue uplift.
I'm thinking back to the beginning of foundation commerce. Most founders, agency founders, tell me the thing they underinvested in early was either people or sales. Which one was it for you?
Underinvested people, probably.
Yeah.
I don't think I really kind of. It was very much like, oh, we need someone, go and find them quickly at the start. And I think kind of now, I wish I had the mindset of finding the right person and understanding what the culture fit was in order to bring them in. I think sales has never really been a problem for us as an agency because I've always been the one leading it. Not to say that I'm the world's greatest sales director, but I feel comfortable in talking to people about solutions and sitting down and mapping out roadmaps and stuff like that. So sales has never really been an issue for us as a business. But yeah, the people side of things, finding good people is incredibly difficult, as I'm sure you may have found the same thing with Loxa.
Yeah. It's what drives the engine, right? So it's who's on the
Yeah.
bus. And like 5 years in, when did foundation commerce stop feeling like a gamble and start feeling like a solid bet that you're winning in the market?
Yeah, I think probably in year 3. I think we'd been working with Citizen Watch about a year. The team had grown to about 10 people, I think. And I think I started going back to the Meet Magento events and stuff like that and hearing from tech partners and stuff how much of a good name that we had. And I think we had a good reputation without us even realising it. It was sort of year 3 that I started to realise, wow, yeah, we are actually disrupting the kind of Magento agency space. Because at the time, there weren't really a lot of good Magento agencies getting very good press. I don't know whether that's because we was early adopters of Hoover and we ran with that very early on, which meant that the outcomes we were delivering for clients was a lot better. Not sure, but yeah, I would say year 3 was when it really started to feel like a solid business with a really good team and a great future.
Nice. Ryan, what's your most controversial prediction for the future of retail?
Most controversial prediction. Oh, cool. We could go deep here. I predict, and I've been predicting this for the last 3 years, that we are going to see a big swing back towards open source commerce. I think that's powered by the fact that what Hoover are doing with Magento. I think now that we've got AI and the speed in which we can develop things with Magento, I really do think that the SaaS model isn't broken. There's still going to be people that are going to want to use SaaS because it's so easy and so simple. But I do think there's going to be a lot more people coming back to open source platforms like Magento, because where it is now in comparison to where it was 5 years ago is just massive. And I think with AI, that's only going to accelerate now.
Yeah.
And when you've got a load of Magento developers powered by AI contributing to the platform, Mage OS just launched what they're claiming to be version 3. But it's a load of features and functionality that merchants need. I think there'll be a swing back towards open source. And I think Hoover has been a primary driver of that, because it really has solved all the problems that Magento had as a platform.
Do you see the fact that Magento is coded in PHP as a language being an issue at all, or does that not matter anymore with AI, or are more people going to learn PHP going forward?
It's something I keep hearing a lot, is that PHP is dead. But I think by the pound for every time I heard Magento was dead, I'd be a millionaire by now. I could retire. And I think it's the same with PHP. I think it still powers a large portion of the internet, and I think a lot of that kind of fear mongering is driven by kind of other sort of JavaScript based frameworks and communities, in the same way that the Magento is dead narrative is pushed by Shopify communities and Shopify themselves. So I do think it's kind of like these platforms, these old these older platforms that don't really have the marketing budget and don't really have a voice. I think it's just the competition's way of increasing their market share, really.
Okay, cool. Appreciate that. And what is your craziest story from working in the retail space thus far?
Craziest story? Yeah, God. I think for us, crazy because we never ever anticipated it to happen, was doubling Citizen Watch's revenue. I think that come as such a shock. It was crazy. We was like, when I'll never forget sitting down with my head of client services and looking at the numbers when we were writing a case study. We were like, we need to check this 2-3 times over, because it's just like these numbers can't be right, but they were. And then we went and doubled it again in year 2 as well, would you believe? And that was a combination of Hoover and CRM, because there was no CRM getting done at that time. But yeah, I think for me, that's the craziest story I've got to tell, is taking a brand like Citizen Watch, winning against 2 of the biggest agencies in the country, and then doubling their revenue in year 1. I think, yeah, that's pretty crazy, right?
How did that feel?
Oh, it felt great. And the client was very, very happy in the decision that they'd made. I think there was a lot of reservations at first. We were an unknown agency. The technology was unknown. But, credit to Citizen, they took a chance on me and Foundation, and we delivered.
Ryan Copeland, thanks for coming on the Retail is Detail podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jamie. Appreciate it.
And that's it for today's episode of the Retail is Detail podcast. This episode was brought to you by Loxa, the Klarna for insurance, helping protect every retail customer everywhere. We help retailers offer product protection seamlessly on all major platforms, online and in store, across all insurable categories. Visit loxacover.com to find out more. You can catch previous episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, or at retailisdetailpodcast.com. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram to get insights from the podcast every day. I've been your host, Jamie Hamer. Thank you for listening, and see you next week.